The forest stretched endlessly before them, its towering trees casting long shadows across the ground. 6 friends stood at the edge of the trail, laughing and chatting as they adjusted their backpacks. Claire tightened the straps on her bag, feeling uneasy, though she couldn't quite explain why. She glanced around at the others, trying to shake off the strange sensation crawling up her spine. The group had planned this trip for weeks, eager to escape the noise of the city and reconnect with nature. But now, standing at the mouth of the dense woods, Claire felt a gnawing sense that something was wrong. They set off down the path, their boots crunching against the dry leaves scattered across the ground. The air smelled earthy and damp, and the only sounds were the rustling of branches overhead and the occasional chirp of birds. For a while everything seemed normal. Mark led the way, cracking jokes to keep everyone entertained, while Sarah lagged behind, snapping photos of the scenery. Claire walked in the middle, her eyes scanning the trees surrounding them. She noticed how close they seemed, almost too close, like they were leaning inward, watching silently. About an hour into the hike, Claire stopped abruptly, staring at the trail ahead. Something about it looked different from when they had first started. Walking, the trees appeared closer together than before, forming a tighter canopy above them. She frowned, glancing back at the others, but no one else seemed to notice. When she mentioned it aloud, Mark chuckled, brushing her concern aside. "It's just your imagination, Claire," he said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "You've been reading too many horror stories." Claire wanted to argue, but instead she pressed her lips together and continued walking. Her unease grew with every step, though she tried to convince herself it was nothing more than fatigue or nerves. By late afternoon, they reached a clearing. Surrounded by massive trees, their trunks twisted and gnarled like ancient sentinels guarding some hidden secret. The group decided to set up camp there, figuring it would be a good spot to rest for the night. As they unpacked their gear, Claire wandered toward the edge of the clearing, her gaze fixed on the forest beyond. That's when she heard it. A faint whisper carried by the breeze. At first she thought it was just the wind playing tricks on her ears, but then it came again, softer this time, yet unmistakably clear. Someone or something was calling her name. She spun around, her heart pounding, but there was no one there. Just the trees standing motionless under the fading light of the sun. Shaking her head, Claire told herself it was nothing, probably just her mind playing tricks after hours of walking. Still, she hurried back to the group, forcing a smile as if nothing was wrong. Night fell quickly, blanketing the clearing in darkness. They gathered around the fire, sharing stories and laughter, though Claire found it hard to focus. Every crackle of the flames, every snap of a twig made her jump. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. The others didn't seem bothered by the eerie atmosphere, joking about ghost stories and urban legends. But Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. When morning came, the mood shifted dramatically. Their food supplies were scattered across the ground, half-eaten or missing entirely. One tent lay collapsed, and inside it they found claw marks etched deeply into the fabric. Fear rippled through the group as realization dawned they were not safe here. Panic began to rise within them as they debated what to do next. Some argued for leaving immediately, retracing their steps back to civilization. Others insisted on staying put, hoping someone would find them. Claire noticed something else odd about the campsite. The trail markers they had relied on to guide them were gone, replaced by smooth, unmarked trunks. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole, erasing any trace of their original path. Her stomach churned with dread as she realized they were lost and trapped in a place that refused to let them leave. And somewhere in the darkness something waited, watching their every move, waiting for its moment to strike. By midday, tensions ran high. Accusations flew back and forth, each person pointing fingers at the others, convinced someone in the group had betrayed them. Claire tried to stay calm, reminding herself that panic would only make things worse. But even she couldn't deny the growing suspicion festering among them. Then came the discovery that sent shockwaves through the group. Near the edge of the clearing, they found fresh footprints circling their tents, but not human ones. Large and misshapen, they belonged to something far bigger than any animal they had ever encountered. And smeared across one tent flap was blood, dark and glistening in the sunlight. Fear turned to terror as they searched for answers. No one could explain how the prints got there or why their supplies had vanished overnight. The forest seemed alive, breathing around them, closing in tighter with each passing hour. That evening, as they sat huddled around the fire, another revelation struck. One of their group members was missing. His name was James, and no one had seen him since last night. A frantic search ensued, but all they found was his backpack abandoned near the hollow tree at the edge of the clearing. Inside it lay a single sheet of paper folded neatly. On it was written a message that chilled them to the bone: "They're watching us." The group fell silent, staring at the note, unable to comprehend its meaning. Who were they? What did it mean? And where was James? Questions swirled in their minds, unanswered and overwhelming. Claire clutched the note tightly, her hands trembling as she stared into the fire. Whatever force was haunting them, it was intelligent, calculating, and merciless. And now it had taken one of their own, leaving behind only fear and uncertainty. As the night deepened, the whispers returned louder, this time echoing through the trees. Claire closed her eyes, trying to block them out, but they persisted, insistent and unrelenting. Each word seemed directed at her, personally taunting her, teasing her with promises of doom. The others claimed they couldn't hear anything, dismissing her claims as paranoia, but Claire knew better. The forest was alive, and it had chosen them as its prey. With no way out and no hope of rescue, the group braced themselves for whatever horrors awaited them in the darkness. For the first time since entering the woods, they truly understood. They were not alone. The guy who knew too much, the discovery of James's backpack, and the cryptic note left the group shaken. The forest that had once seemed vast and beautiful now felt like a prison closing in around them. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent their hearts racing. Claire clutched the note tightly, her knuckles white as she stared into the fire. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the words. They're watching us. Who were they? What did it mean? And most importantly, where was James? The questions swirled endlessly, unanswered and overwhelming. By morning, desperation had taken hold. They decided to move, hoping to find help or at least some sign of civilization. But the trail markers were still gone, leaving them with no clear direction. As they trudged through the dense underbrush, arguments broke out repeatedly. Mark insisted they press forward, while Sarah argued for staying put in case rescuers came looking for them. Claire remained quiet, her focus inward as she tried to piece together what was happening. She couldn't shake the feeling that the forest itself was alive, shifting and changing to keep them trapped. Hours passed, and the group stumbled upon an unexpected sight: a coffin, small wooden cabin nestled among the trees. Smoke curled lazily from its chimney, suggesting someone lived there. Relief washed over them briefly as they approached, cautiously unsure whether this was salvation or another trap. The door creaked open before they could knock, revealing an old man with weathered skin and piercing eyes. He studied them silently, his gaze lingering on each face before finally speaking. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and gravelly. His words sent a chill down their spines, though none of them dared argue. Instead, they begged him for help, explaining how they had gotten lost and what had happened to James. The old man listened intently, nodding occasionally but offering little in return. When they finished, he warned them never to camp near the hollow tree. "That place is cursed," he muttered, turning away as if unwilling to say more. Confused but grateful, the group thanked him and prepared to leave. Yet something about his demeanor lingered, unsettling them even further. Claire hesitated, glancing back at the cabin as they walked away. Something didn't feel right about the encounter. Later that afternoon, they split up into pairs hoping to cover more ground in their search for supplies or clues about James's disappearance. Claire paired with Sarah while Mark went off with two others. The decision to separate filled her with unease, but she pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on finding answers. Claire and Sarah wandered deeper into the woods, their surroundings growing darker and more oppressive with each step. The trees loomed taller, their branches twisting unnaturally overhead. Suddenly, Sarah stopped, pointing at something etched into the bark of a nearby tree. It was a symbol, crude yet unmistakable, resembling an eye surrounded by jagged lines. Claire frowned, recognizing it from local legends she had read online before the trip. According to those stories, such symbols were used by ancient tribes to ward off evil spirits. But why would they appear here? As they continued searching, they found more carvings scattered throughout the forest, each one slightly different, yet equally unsettling. Some depicted animals twisted into grotesque shapes, while others showed shadowy figures reaching out with clawed hands. Claire felt a growing sense of dread as she realized these markings told a story, a warning perhaps, about the very land they were walking on. By the time they reached the hollow tree mentioned by the old man, her nerves were frayed to their breaking point. The tree stood alone in a small clearing, its trunk gnarled and blackened as if scorched by fire long ago. A gaping hole yawned at its base, large enough for a person to crawl inside. Claire hesitated, screaming at her to turn back, but curiosity drove her forward. Inside the hollow, she found something that made her blood run cold. A rotting backpack half buried beneath layers of dirt and leaves. Its contents spilled out haphazardly, including tattered journal photographs and various personal belongings. One photo caught her attention, showing a group of people smiling brightly in front of the same hollow tree years ago. Sarah gasped beside her, clutching the photo tightly. "This is impossible," she whispered, her voice trembling. "These people, they disappeared decades ago. No one ever found them." Claire flipped through the journal, skimming frantic entries detailing strange occurrences, paranoia, and eventual madness. Whoever had written it believed the forest was alive, feeding off fear, guilt, and regret. As she read further, the final entry sent a shiver down her spine. "If you find this, do not trust anyone, not even yourself." Before they could process what they had discovered, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. Spinning around, they saw nothing but shadows moving between the trees. Panic surged within them as they hurried back toward camp, hoping the others had returned safely. When they arrived, however, chaos greeted them. Supplies were scattered across the ground, torn open as if searched hastily. Footprints marked the earth, too large to belong to any human. Worst of all, Mark and the others were nowhere to be found. Claire's heart sank as she realized the situation had grown far worse than they had imagined. Searching the area, they uncovered another chilling message scrawled across a piece of paper. Left conspicuously near the fire, "You shouldn't have come here." The handwriting matched the note they had found in James's backpack, confirming their worst fears. The entity stalking them was intelligent, calculating, and merciless. Fear gripped them fully now as they huddled together, waiting for nightfall. Darkness fell quickly, wrapping the forest in an impenetrable shroud. The whispers returned, louder this time, almost deafening. Shadows danced unnaturally, stretching longer than they should have. Claire closed her eyes, trying to block out the noise, but it persisted, insistent and unrelenting. Each word seemed directed at her, personally taunting her, teasing her with promises of doom. Beside her, Sarah sobbed quietly, clutching the journal tightly as if it might offer some protection. The old man's warning echoed in Claire's mind. That place is cursed. But it was too late now. They were already part of whatever nightmare the forest had woven. Then came the realization that hit Claire like a punch to the gut. The old man, he hadn't been trying to help them at all. His warnings weren't meant to save them. They were meant to prepare them for what was coming. Somehow he knew exactly who and what was hunting them. And now with Mark and the others gone, Claire and Sarah were truly alone. Trapped in a living nightmare with no way out. And no hope of rescue, they braced themselves for whatever horrors awaited them in the darkness. For the first time since entering the woods, they truly understood. They were being hunted. Betrayal among shadows, the night stretched endlessly before them, the darkness pressing down like a suffocating weight. Claire and Sarah sat huddled together, near the remnants of their fire, its embers glowing faintly in the oppressive gloom. The forest seemed alive around them, its shadows shifting unnaturally, as if watching silently, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, sent their hearts racing. They had no idea where Mark or the others were, and the thought of being alone in this cursed place filled them with dread. Claire clutched the journal they had found in the hollow tree, its pages filled with frantic scribbles and warnings about the forest's malevolent nature. She read through it again, searching for answers, but the entries only deepened her unease. One passage stood out, describing how the forest preyed on guilt and regret, feeding off the emotions of those trapped within. It claimed that those who entered carried their darkest secrets with them, and the forest used those secrets against them, twisting reality until sanity unraveled completely. Claire shivered, wondering what secrets the forest might be using against her own mind. Sarah stared into the fire, her face pale and drawn. She hadn't spoken much since returning from their search earlier, her thoughts clearly consumed by fear and exhaustion. Claire tried to comfort her, offering reassurances she didn't fully believe herself. "We'll get out of here," she said softly, though her voice lacked conviction. Sarah nodded weakly, but her eyes betrayed doubt and despair. Neither of them believed rescue was coming, not anymore. As dawn approached, the tension between them grew palpable. Sleep had been impossible, with the constant whispers echoing through the trees, taunting them relentlessly. Claire couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was toying with their minds. Every shadow seemed to move just out of sight. Every noise hinted at unseen threats lurking nearby. Paranoia gnawed at her edges, making her question everything, including Sarah's loyalty. Hadn't Sarah been acting strangely since finding the journal? Her sudden silence, her distant gaze, it all felt off somehow. By mid-morning, their food supplies were nearly gone, scavenged either by animals or perhaps even taken deliberately by whatever force haunted the forest. Hunger added another layer of desperation to their already fragile state. Arguments flared easily, tempers fraying under the strain. When Claire suggested splitting up again to search for help, Sarah vehemently opposed the idea. "We're safer together," she insisted, though her tone lacked confidence. Claire hesitated, torn between staying united and exploring further on her own. Trust was eroding quickly between them, replaced by suspicion and fear. Later that afternoon, while gathering firewood, Claire overheard Sarah talking quietly to herself, or so it seemed at first. Creeping closer, she realized Sarah wasn't alone. Someone else was there, hidden among the trees, whispering urgently. Claire froze, her heart pounding as she strained to listen. Fragments of their conversation reached her ears, words like, "Didn't mean for this to happen, and we can still fix it." Anger surged within her as realization dawned. Sarah had known something about this forest all along. This wasn't just an innocent trip gone wrong. It was a setup. Confronting Sarah later, Claire demanded answers, her voice trembling with rage and betrayal. At first, Sarah denied everything, her expression defensive, but when Claire pressed harder, accusing her of lying, Sarah broke down sobbing. She confessed that she had heard rumors about the forest before agreeing to join the trip. Stories of disappearances, curses, and unexplainable horrors had intrigued her morbid curiosity, leading her to suggest this very location, despite knowing the risks. "I thought it would be exciting," she admitted tearfully. "I never imagined it would be real." Her confession shattered what little trust remained between them, leaving Claire feeling more isolated than ever. Yet even as anger burned inside her, Claire couldn't ignore the shared predicament they were in. Whether Sarah had intended harm Or not, they were both victims now caught in the same deadly web spun by the forest itself. Still, suspicion lingered heavy and unshakable. Could Sarah truly be trusted? Or was she still hiding something? That evening, as they prepared to settle down for another restless night, one of them vanished without explanation. Claire turned away for just a moment, distracted by a strange noise in the distance. When she looked back, Sarah was gone, leaving behind only her backpack and a cryptic note tucked inside. The message read, "They're closer than you think." Fear gripped Claire fully now as she realized the forest was playing a cruel game, manipulating their fears and tearing them apart piece by piece. Desperation drove her to search for Sarah, calling out her name until her throat was raw. But the forest swallowed her cries, muffling them into silence. Every step she took seemed to lead her deeper into chaos, the path twisting unpredictably like a maze designed to confuse and trap. Eventually, she stumbled upon something that made her blood run cold: a phone abandoned near the base of a tree. Picking it up, she recognized it immediately. It belonged to Sarah. Flipping it open, she discovered a series of photos stored in the gallery, each one more disturbing than the last. The images showed their group sleeping peacefully in their tents, but none of them remembered taking these pictures. Worse still, the timestamps revealed they had been captured hours ago while everyone had been awake and moving around camp. How was that possible? Who or what had taken them? Claire's mind raced, grappling with the implications. If someone had been watching them closely enough to photograph them unnoticed, then escape might already be impossible. Whoever controlled this forest knew their every move, anticipated their every decision. Returning to the campsite, Claire found herself overwhelmed by loneliness and despair. Without Sarah or the others, she felt utterly exposed, vulnerable to whatever horrors awaited her in the darkness. The whispers returned louder now, almost deafening, filling her ears with accusations and taunts. Shadows danced unnaturally, stretching longer than they should have until they seemed to close in around her. Claire clutched the phone tightly, clinging to it as if it might offer some semblance of connection to the world beyond this nightmare. Then came the realization that hit her like a punch to the gut. Sarah hadn't disappeared by accident. She had been taken, or worse, willingly joined forces with whatever entity ruled this land. Betrayal cut deep, slicing through Claire's resolve and leaving her questioning everything she thought she knew. Was anyone truly trustworthy? Or was everyone ultimately expendable in the eyes of the forest? As the night wore on, Claire braced herself for the inevitable. She knew the forest wouldn't stop until it had claimed them all, feeding off their fear, guilt, and regret, until nothing remained but empty shells. For the first time since entering this cursed place, she allowed herself to confront the truth. They weren't just lost. They were being hunted, systematically broken down, and devoured by something far older and far crueler than any of them could comprehend. And now, with Sarah gone, Claire faced the harsh reality of her situation alone. The truth beneath the roots. The forest seemed to breathe around Claire, its shadows twisting and shifting in ways that defied logic. Alone and terrified, she clutched Sarah's phone tightly, as if it were a lifeline connecting her to some semblance of reality. The photos stored on it haunted her mind, replaying endlessly like a broken record. Each image showed their group sleeping, peacefully unaware that they were being watched, captured by an unseen presence that moved among them undetected. How could something so unnatural exist? And why had it chosen them? Claire knew she couldn't stay in one place any longer. Sitting idle would only invite more danger. Her instincts screamed at her to move, to find answers, or at least some way out of this nightmare. But where could she go? Every direction led deeper into chaos, the paths twisting unpredictably like veins in a living organism designed to trap and confuse. Still, she forced herself to stand, brushing dirt from her clothes and gripping the phone tightly. If there was even a sliver of hope, she had to take it. Her feet carried her back toward the hollow tree, the source of so much dread, yet also the only clue she had left. Something about that place called to her, not with whispers this time, but with a pull deep within her chest, as if the answers she sought lay buried beneath its roots. As she approached the clearing where the tree stood, she noticed how much darker. It seemed here as if the sunlight itself refused to penetrate this cursed spot. The air felt heavier too, pressing down on her shoulders, until each step required monumental effort. When she reached the hollow tree, she hesitated, staring into its gaping maw. It looked impossibly larger than before, its blackened interior swallowing light and sound alike. She knelt beside it, peering inside, cautiously, half expecting something to leap out at her. Instead, she found carvings etched into the inner walls, symbols too intricate to be natural. They resembled the ones scattered throughout the forest, but here they were sharper, clearer, glowing faintly as if infused with some ancient power. Among them were the names of dozens of them, carved deeply into the wood. Some appeared centuries old, weathered by time, while others looked fresh, glistening, weighty, as if freshly inscribed. Claire ran her fingers over the names, searching for anything familiar. Then she froze, her blood turning to ice. Two names stood out, stark against the rest: Jane's and Sarah. Below each name was a date followed by a single word: terminated. Her breath hitched as realization dawned, painfully slow yet undeniable. This wasn't just a random attack, it was deliberate, calculated punishment. Whoever entered these woods became part of its cycle, unable to leave until they paid their dues, whatever those might be. Before she could process what she had discovered, voices began echoing softly around her. At first they were indistinct murmurs, blending with the rustle of leaves and snap of twigs. But soon they coalesced into words, calling her name, urging her closer. Claire resisted at first, her body trembling with fear, but curiosity drove her forward, inch by agonizing inch. She stepped into the hollow tree, guided by an unseen force that seemed to emanate from the very ground beneath her feet. Inside, the space expanded impossibly wide, revealing a hidden chamber bathed in dim greenish light. The walls were covered in more carvings, along with faded paintings depicting scenes of horror and despair. People screaming, running, fleeing from shadowy figures that loomed larger than life. In the center of the chamber lay an altar made of stone, stained dark with what looked like dried blood. On it rested a book bound in cracked leather, its pages yellowed with age. Claire approached it cautiously, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. Flipping open the book, she found it filled with entries written in shaky ink detailing rituals, sacrifices, and warnings about the entity that ruled this land. One passage described how the forest fed on human emotions: guilt, regret, betrayal, amplifying them until sanity unraveled completely. Another explained that escape required appeasement, a life given willingly to break the curse binding the trapped souls. Sacrifice. The word hit her like a punch to the gut, stirring memories she had tried desperately to bury. Flashbacks surged, unbidden, flooding her mind with moments of pain and regret. She saw herself years ago sabotaging a co-worker's project out of jealousy, ensuring her own promotion instead. She remembered abandoning a close friend during their darkest hour, too consumed by her own struggles to offer support. Guilt washed over her, threatening to drown her entirely. The forest had preyed on these weaknesses, feeding off them until they consumed her thoughts. And now it demanded payment, a life to free the others. Suddenly footsteps echoed behind her, slow and deliberate. Turning sharply, Claire saw a figure emerge from the shadows. It was Sarah, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow as if drained of all life. For a moment, relief flooded through Claire, thinking she had found her missing companion alive. But then Sarah spoke, her voice cold and calculating. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, advancing slowly. "It's your fault we're trapped." Betrayal cut deeper than ever before, slicing through Claire's resolve and leaving her questioning everything she thought she knew. Sarah admitted she had made a deal with the entity, offering the group's lives in exchange for her own freedom. But now she realized the truth. There was no escaping once you were marked. The forest didn't release its prey easily, as Sarah Lunged toward her, Claire stumbled backward, tripping over exposed roots. Pain shot through her leg as she hit the ground hard, dropping the journal in the process. Pages fluttered open, revealing one final entry scrawled hastily in bold letters. Only sacrifice can break the cycle. Desperation clawed at her as she understood what she had to do. If survival meant facing her deepest fears and confronting the consequences of her actions, then so be it. Whatever came next, she would have to face it alone or risk becoming part of the forest's endless torment. With trembling hands, Claire completed the ritual, carving the final symbol into her palm. Pain seared through her, sharp and unrelenting, but she didn't falter. The glowing circle erupted in light, blinding her momentarily as the forest trembled violently around her. Shadows writhed and twisted, dissolving into nothingness as the entity let out a final ear-splitting scream. When the light faded, silence fell heavy and absolute. Claire collapsed to her knees, exhausted but alive. For the first time since entering the forest, she felt peace. The curse was broken, its hold over the land shattered at last. Yet amidst the emptiness, a spark of resolve ignited within her. If survival meant redemption, then she would embrace it. Fully determined to live differently, honoring those who hadn't made it out alive. For sometimes it is only by losing everything that we truly discover ourselves. What remains, the first rays of sunlight, pierced through the dense canopy, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Claire stumbled toward the edge of the woods, her body weak and trembling, but her mind clearer than it had ever been. The heavy air that had once pressed down on her like a suffocating weight was gone, replaced by a crisp breeze that carried the scent of fresh earth. She emerged from the trees, squinting against the brightness of the morning sun, feeling a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The nightmare was over, or so she hoped. Behind her the forest stood silent, its twisted branches no longer moving unnaturally, its whispers silenced forever. The hollow tree where she had performed the ritual was now just a gnarled stump, charred and lifeless as if consumed by fire. Claire glanced back one last time, half expecting to see shadowy figures watching her from the tree line, but there was nothing. Just an empty expanse of wilderness stretching endlessly into the distance. Yet even as she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that something still lingered, deep within those woods, waiting for its next victims. Her thoughts turned to James and Sarah, and the others who hadn't made it out alive. Their faces flashed in her mind, vivid and painful reminders of the cost of survival. She had seen their names carved into the walls of the hollow tree, terminated written beside each one, like a cruel epitaph. Guilt weighed heavily on her chest, knowing that she had played a role in their fate, however unintentional. If only she had trusted her instincts earlier, if only she had questioned Sarah's motives sooner, maybe things would have ended differently. But regret was a luxury she could no longer afford. What mattered now was how she chose to move forward. As she reached the edge of the forest, Claire noticed something clutched tightly in her hand, a small piece of paper torn from the ritual book. On it was written a single line scrawled hastily in bold ink: "Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find who you really are." The words struck a chord deep within her, resonating with the pain and redemption she had endured. Tears welled up in her eyes, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude for the second chance she had been given. The forest may have taken pieces of her, but it had also shown her who she truly was, and who she could become. Back in the real world, Claire found herself sitting on a bench near the hospital's entrance, drenched in sweat and exhaustion. Passers-by glanced at her curiously, but no one stopped to ask questions. She realized then that no one would believe what had happened inside those woods. It didn't matter, though. What mattered was how she chose to live her life from this point forward. The forest had stripped her bare, forcing her to confront the person she had become. Now it was up to her to rebuild, to transform regret into purpose, guilt into growth. Days turned into weeks, and Claire began making changes in her life. She reached out to those she had wronged, offering sincere apologies and attempting to make amends. Some accepted, others didn't, but each step brought her closer to healing. She started volunteering at a local shelter, finding solace in helping others who felt lost or broken, just as she once had. Through these acts of kindness, she discovered a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive. One evening, while sorting through old belongings, Claire came across a photograph taken years ago during happier times. In it, she stood beside Sarah, smiling brightly, unaware of the resentment that would later drive them apart. A pang of sadness hit her, but also a quiet resolve. She placed the photo back in its box, vowing to honor Sarah's memory by living fully and authentically. Though Sarah was gone, her presence remained etched in Claire's heart, a reminder of the lessons they had both learned too late. Years passed, and the abandoned forest became nothing more than a distant memory buried beneath layers of time and overgrown weeds. To most people, it was just another forgotten relic of the past. But for Claire, it symbolized something greater, a turning point where despair had transformed into hope, fear into courage, and loss into redemption. Whenever she faced challenges, she remembered the horrors she had survived and the strength it had taken to emerge stronger on the other side. In the end, Claire realized that true freedom wasn't about escaping the darkness. It was about learning to carry its weight without letting it crush you. The forest may have taken everything from her, but it had also given her something invaluable, the chance to start anew. And so with every sunrise, she embraced life, fully determined to live not just for herself, but for all those who hadn't made it out alive. For sometimes it is only by losing everything that we truly discover ourselves. Claire often returned to the edge of the forest years later, standing at a safe distance as if paying respects to the land that had changed her forever. She knew the stories would fade with time, dismissed as folklore or urban legends. But she also knew the truth. The forest was real, and its power was absolute. It had taught her the value of honesty, humility, and redemption, lessons she carried with her every day. And though she would never forget the horrors she had faced, she was grateful for the transformation they had sparked within her. The human journey is rarely straightforward, filled with moments of darkness and light, betrayal and forgiveness, loss and renewal. Claire had walked through the depths of despair and emerged on the other side stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. She understood now that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about finding meaning in the struggle and using it to build a better future. For Claire, the forest had been both a curse and a blessing, forcing her to confront her flaws and embrace her potential. And though the scars remained, they served as reminders of how far she had come and how much farther she could go as she walked away from the forest for the final time. Claire whispered a silent thank you to the land that had tested her so mercilessly. It had taken everything from her, but in return it had given her something far greater, a second chance to live authentically and purposefully. And with that, she stepped into the sunlight, ready to face whatever lay ahead with courage and grace. The end.